The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the first feature focus session of 2016 regarding the B1 usability package and its many features. Today's topic is exchange rates and the server components. It's a light topic, so we probably won't spend the entire hour here, but we will go into fairly big detail on how to set it up, because there is sometimes some concerns and misconceptions on how the system works. So we will go into a fairly deep dive into how it works, what the different features are, as you see on the screen, and go into how to set up the server component and some best practices on what we normally do for the system. Please note that this session is being recorded and will later be on YouTube if needed. So let's begin. So exchange rates is a system that actually goes out onto the web and figure out what the exchange rate are on that specific day. And it can do it from different what we call sources. The default source when you just install usability package is the European Central Bank, because they are one of the most reliable providers on this. But there's many more providers. The providers have grown over the years, so there's the different national banks of, for example, Denmark and Israel and so on. So all depending on where you are in the world, it makes sense to go into different banks and get different rates. They are not that different because we live in a global market with almost the same rates, but the difference is when they update it. Normal, these banks update it once a day. So, for example, European Central Bank does it on at 15 o'clock every single day, while other banks does it in a different day. And the closer the provider is to your country, the more up to date the rate will be. So if you are in Australia and use European Central Bank, well, it works, but it will perhaps come at an odd time when they actually update it for the day. So what you do is you normally go into Business One and choose your provider depending on what you want. And if we look in here, all things happening from administration, add-ons, usability package, and under module configuration there is the online exchange rates. So here's the list I just showed you. And another thing in providing the rate provider can be depending on how many different exchange rates they support. Finding that, the easiest way is to go into our help file, and for there, each the provider, we have the link to that provider. So for example, if I want to go into European Central Bank, I can go to their website, put it in here, and we can see the different rates they support. So they support 2, 4, 6, roughly 25 to 30 different rates. Other will provide other rates, of course, in other different formats. Here's one supporting many different rates, while some of them actually only provide a very few rates. For example, this Mexican bank only provides to US dollars. So all depending on what your customer need for rates, you can go in and choose the one that fits you the best. And later in this session, I will also show what needs to be done in order to actually provide a new rate provider so we can implement it in here. If you have a customer with extreme amounts of rates and you cannot really find a provider that actually gives that have all the rates in all the different systems, you can choose the provider called Wanda. Wanda is a customer that have oops, we cannot go to their website directly in here, but we can go to their website via a browser, and they have a subscription for doing rates, but for that rate you get almost 200 different exchange rates in the system. One second, I have some static on the line from one of the participants. Can you hear me still? Could you please write in chat if you can read me? Yeah, you can hear me. Okay. Good. So so Wanda, there's a price for them, and once you choose them, you go in and give a subscription ID to the system, and then you can get many more rates than what the free ones up here actually provides. So that's the first thing in choosing your provider based on what we have. And again, at the end of this session, we will talk about what can be done in order to actually get multiple or new providers into the system if needed. So choosing the rate source is of course the first thing, and once I do that and press the set rate now, it will set up the rates. The way it works afterward is that if you log into the system, start usability package, it will check if you are allowed to set rates depending on your permissions, and if you are allowed to set them, you can then it will then set the rates for you when you log in. Later on, we'll talk about the server component that can do it for you every night, so you don't need to use some of these more obscure features in trying to cover that. What if you don't log in during the weekend and you still need rates during the weekend? So this is what normally happens. It's based on logging in and setting the rates for you. So I could re-log in and get the rates, or I can try to remove the rates and say set rates now, and it will get my rates in there. So let's go through the options of what you can do with the rates that's pulled down from, in this case, European Central Bank. So the first one is you can set how many decimals you want in the rates. Normal default is 4, and the most systems provide 4, but if you want, you can round them off slightly, putting it into 3 or 4, depending on what you want. Another option you can do is you can go into monthly rates. So that would, instead of just that one day, say the first of the month when you run it, it will take that rate and put it in for the entire month. Some few customers do that, and there's actually also some providers that actually only give rates at a monthly rate. So that's all, of course, up to the business on what you need to do. Then we have the fill in indicated days back if missing, and this caused some confusion on what that means. Essentially, it means if I set it to 2, it will set the rates right now for today, and then check on the 8th, day 1, and on the 7th, day 2, if rates are missing. And if they are missing, it will set those rates in. So right now they are actually missing, and for me it will now set the rates. But it will set the rates for from today onto those days. And that's because almost none of these providers actually gives a historic rate system. So a few of them does, but we haven't implemented that system into it because it will be too many calls to these free services. So instead, it just looks at the rate today and fill back how many days you have now set it up to be missing. So fill back missing indicated days is fairly straightforward on how it works, but Where some people get a lot of confusion is if they combine it with this field down here, set days in future. So of course we cannot predict the future. So 2 days in the future is a system before server component came along that could set it up that you doing Friday actually set the rate during Sunday instead, 2 days into the future. And it would set up that we are on the 9th today, but we set it on the 11th instead. So we would skew the data. The first 2 days we would be missing them entirely, and but then we would actually be able to cover those days we didn't log in. In my mind, once we got the server component, if you set that up, you don't really need to set these in any way back and forward. But combined, we could do something like this: 2 back, 2 future and 2 back, and we will end up putting them on the 11th and put back to the day we had. This was something some people did in the past. So in that regard, we can set them up if needed. But again, when we come to server component, if you can set that up, that's the best practice now, because then it will do it every single day, no matter if anyone have logged in or not. Another thing that you will see is that if we put in a rate by ourselves, something very unusual, and say set rates, the first thing it will do here is it will actually warn if there's a deviation that is too high. In this case, it's much too high than what the rate is that we have set compared to now. So it will ask me if I want to continue. That is mostly if some rates fluctuate very much, or essentially if some of these sources actually make a mistake and send some data incorrect or change their APIs and we haven't yet been able to implement it. But if you still allow it, it will put in the days, but rates that are already there will never be overridden if you just use the client itself. So let me get rid of these again. And let's go to the last ones. So we talked about deviation. And again, if you're a little unsure of what they do, always press the small buttons and it will tell you in details, or it will press F1 and you will see the things. But let me get back to 0 days here so we have a more normal system. The final 2 fields we have here is additional fee. So essentially, let me just get the rate so we have, I need to update, so they run. Need to put in some, there we go. Get rid of them. There we go, back in normal mode. If I just keep this up here so we can see the actual rates and then get rid of this, we can go in and set a direct fee automatically, not that often, but for example, if we have some rates that are very similar, I could put in that it should give 1 additional to every one of them, meaning doesn't really make sense that much in when we have these kind of rates, but in certain areas where you only have specific rates, it would make sense. The one that makes a little more sense, and that's especially if you gain a little by using some different rates, would be that I can put in a 5% additional charge on the rates, and it will be 5% higher than what they normally should be in the system. Not that often used, but they are in there if your customer requires such a feature. Okay, so that was what you can set and just use without any server component part. What you can do is you can enable the server component, and then my recommendation is strongly that you actually do that. You enable it here, and at the same time you need to install the server component. And I have it installed on my system, and I have gone through the wizard, so this database is part of the exchange rate. When I do that, I can now see the exchange rates running here, and from the system I will be able to run the tester here, else it will happen when I set it up. In this case, I've set it up to be 1 minute past midnight every day, and I could run it here instead just to test. And once it's done, it's finishing up with sending some emails and such things. It has just imported the rates for me without me needing to go into the system. So this is my very much recommended system, that if you do daily rates, set it up to be 1 minute past midnight, and set up if you want any success mails. Perhaps in the first few days you want a success mail, and after that only if something goes wrong and it cannot set the rates for some reason, it will send an email to this email address. Server component can technically also be set up for monthly. And in that case, what day of the month do you want to run it? In this case, it's the first of the month. Again, monthly not being that often, and if you only need to log in once a month, it doesn't really matter if you have a server component. Server component can do a few additional things if it's turned on. It can go in and say, you should always update exchange rates, even if they are filled in. So if I do that and put in another rate here, 0.4, but run it as a server component again, it will actually go in and set the rate no matter what I put into the system. Again, depending on business needs, if you want to have that rates can fluctuate day by day, then it is possible to do. So now it's run, and we should be able to see that it's going back to the correct rates right now. If server components are turned on, you can also set that even if people log in, that code will not run the server component. That code would not set the rates. So we can set up, and if I start the system, it would not set the rates by me just logging in. It needs to be the server component doing it, because then you don't end up with someone logging in prior to when you have set up the server component and setting the rates for you instead. So these are the options that are in the system. So let's go back to the slides. Yeah, so here's the slide of the server component. You need to install it. I haven't gone through the install part, but it's quite easy. Just install the product, go to the wizard. In this case, tell what data you want to send the email to, an SMTP. Get the different databases in your system. It takes a little while because it checks. I have a lot of different databases, and log into the system you want. And once you have done that, it now understands the server component. It's not enough to just enable this checkbox. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. So some FAQs to this. Many people ask in our support, why is the rates off by 1 day? So I come in at 8 o'clock in the morning. It sets some rates. Those rates looks okay. And then I later at the day go in and look at a website that keeps track of the European Central Bank's rates, and the rate is different. That's because, of course, at 8 o'clock, we cannot know what the rate will be at 15 o'clock that day. So the rate provided by European Central Bank at 8 o'clock at that day is actually yesterday's rates. It makes quite a lot of sense when you are sitting in the same time zone as European Central Bank, of course, but it gets more complicated to understand when are the rates linked up in your system compared to when the rates are actually set by the different system, because each bank have a different system. Again, European Central Bank does it at 15 o'clock, but actually from July next year, they will set it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon instead. So dates will always be, or rates will always be skewed by 1 day, roughly, if you still want the rate to be in early morning so you can actually begin to work during the day. So it will never be able to sync up exactly what it is, because that simply doesn't make sense. Time zones is another thing. We don't support the time zone feature inside Business One by itself. So if you have different databases with different time zones, you need to go into the exchange rate system and figure out what that exchange rate fits to in a server runtime date normally. So if you have 6 hours difference in the system, you should put it 6 hours later when it actually should run, because server component will run 24/7 and set them when you want to do it, and that's the workaround for the time zone feature. Finally, common is that SAP, for some odd reason, have chosen that the code should not be the correct ISO code. So, for example, in a US database, you have the $sign. While it might look cool, that should really not be the code behind officially. But for some reason it is. And for that reason, we have put in that the way we check is we first look at the ISO currency code, if that's set, and use that. If not, we try to use our own system that was in place before ISO code came along. And if that's not set as either, it will try what's here. But in this case, it will hit USD, which is the right code, and that's the reason why it works, even though it states this $sign. We will try to set up as many of these as possible, but if you have some rare exchange rate, you might need to set up either the ISO code or the extended ISO code from our part inside the currency table. The same goes for Canada, for example. Here they are called CAN, but the real ISO code is actually CAD. And of course, the banks always use the right ISO code. But in most cases, we handle all of this. You don't need to care, but if there's some rates that for some reason cannot be set, that is the way to go around the system setting up incorrect codes. Next up, I showed you a list of different providers, and you might not have the bank local to you. For example, let's say we don't have a bank in, Chile. And if you want that bank in Chile, or you have a bank in France or something, and you want those to be part of this system, it is possible for you to send us a support mail saying you would really like this and this bank to have exchange rates. There is some criteria on what we allow to put into the system. First of all, the bank needs to have it free of charge. We have one subscription service, the Oanda service, and the rest should be free of charge. That's our design goals in this. Then the system needs to give the data in a structured format. That could be XML, that could be CSV, and that could be some kind of file. I have a sample in just 1 second on what I mean by a good structure. Because it cannot just be a website or download. So This is the European Central Bank again, and this is their main page. And you need to help us figure out which banks you want to be put in there, because we don't really know in every single country what is the official bank. They might have a website in a different language. So you need to help us say, this is the bank. Here they have the file in the system. So here's European Central Bank, and by the first look of it, we cannot really use anything because this is just a website, and we don't want to begin to scrape the data from these fields in here on what the different rates are. But European Central Bank also provides some downloads here. So what they do is they have a PDF version. This we don't want to begin to understand a PDF version and try to figure out what's in here and so on. So this is not a good source for us either. Again, it could be done, but as soon as the European Central Bank just change a little in this PDF, it might break entirely. So again, we will reject such a proposal to integrate based on a PDF, for example, or the website down here. They also have a CSV format, but the problem with that is it comes down as a zip file. Okay, in big cases, it could be done that we could download that zip file, unzip it, figure out how the data is structured, and so on. But again, they have a very good solution. They have an XML format system. That XML format is just a link, very well formed, and very easy to go by. It's very unlikely to change. Banks are very conventional about not changing such things. So this is a very good sample on, okay, there's some of these scenarios we couldn't really use, but they have a very good solution. But if we get to another bank and they only have this, we will reject that bank. If they only have some kind of file that is not in a structured format, or you need to log into the bank or anything, we don't want to do that. Web services we could also do, but it needs to be in a structured, free format. Send us the links if you are unsure, and we will tell you if it's good or bad. And with that, we come to the end of this session. If there's any questions, you can unmute yourself or write them in the chat, and I will try to take them. If there's no questions, or while people write the questions now, the next feature focus session will be on the 23rd of February, where we will talk about some advanced features in item placement tool, and compare it a little to SAP's UI template as well, on what we can do and what we can't do in the system. So I don't know if there's any questions. If not, you may disconnect at this time, and thank you for attending. Okay, there seem to be no questions, so thank you.